Imagine a story where invisible danger lurks on the air itself. Carbon dioxide poisoning, a silent antagonist in your fiction stories. This episode dives into the chilling realities of CO2 poisoning, unraveling its natural origins like volcanic eruptions and cave death pockets. Alongside man-made sources such as industrial mishaps and poorly ventilated spaces, discover how characters might unwittingly stumble into peril and subtle signs and symptoms that build tension, and the catastrophic ways that survival plans can go awry. Whether you're story crafting thrillers, survival tales, or historical dramas, this exploration promises to add depth, danger, and realism to your storytelling toolkit. Buckle up for a journey into science and suspense of CO2 poisoning. Welcome to Writing Rule with Allie, the Fiction Writers Weekly inspiration station for rural life and lifestyles, helping you bring your rural stories to life. I'm Allie, and this is episode number 106, Breath of Peril, weaving CO2 hazards into your fiction. Stick around to the end to find out all the ways things could possibly go wrong in your story. Before we get started, I know I was supposed to be back last week, but my recovery from a routine procedure took a little longer than expected. However, I'm back and feeling fine. I even have a special announcement at the end of this episode that you do not want to miss. Now, let's get into this. Carbon dioxide, also called CO2, is a colorless, odorless gas that is harmless in low amounts, but becomes dangerous or even deadly in high amounts. Now, let me be clear. Carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide are two different types of gases. While both are potentially deadly, they have many differences, one of which is that carbon dioxide is not flammable. And since I tend to mix the two names up, I will refer to carbon dioxide as CO2 for this episode. Let's cover some basic science so that everyone is on the same page, and I promise it will be important later in this episode. We all likely remember the lessons about humans breathing in oxygen and breathing out CO2. Plants then use the CO2 to photosynthesize, and this makes oxygen. If your school was anything like mine, it was linked to why we need the rainforest so much. Another characteristic of CO2 is that it is heavier than air. Now, I have looked through several science sites, and they cannot agree on how much heavier it is. I have found 53% to 55% heavier. And then I decided, hey, why don't I ask AI? And it said it was 37.5% heavier. Take that how you will, but my point is that it sinks, so to speak. This means that it naturally pools in low-lying areas. These pools are known as death pockets. Now, there are many natural sources for CO2 and man-made sources. Let's start with the natural sources. First is volcanoes, or volcanic activity. Volcanoes can emit high amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. This sounds mild until you remember that CO2 is heavier than air. That means that the CO2 can pool in valleys or other low-lying areas. There's a theory that some of the people in Pompeii that were hiding in underground food storage areas may have died from CO2 poisoning since the CO2 would settle in low-lying areas. Now, not only can CO2 kill people, but it also kills animals, and this could have devastating effects to ecosystems. Earthquakes can also release CO2 along the fault lines. This holds the same dangers as volcanoes on top of the devastation that a large earthquake could cause. Keep in mind, volcanic eruptions can cause or be caused by an earthquake. There is also something called lake overturn. This is where volcanic activity or earthquakes or other natural phenomenons can cause large amounts of CO2 to be released below the water and rise to the surface. Any poor unsuspecting sailor who sailed through this could end up in a deadly scenario. Not only are the sailors at risk of dying, but so are any fish who swim through the area. Both volcanoes and earthquakes can release CO2 into caves and mine shafts. Caves rarely have good ventilation, and if there was even a minor earthquake, this could cause a cave-in, or damage the ventilation shafts of a mine. Even without such violent natural catastrophes, there are other natural phenomenons that can lead to CO2 pockets inside of caves or in mine shafts. Historically, people would take a torch, candle, lantern, or other flame, and if the flame went out, they knew that the air was no longer safe. There is one very huge thing to know about flames. There can be different types of gases inside the cave that can be deadly, including methane. If you don't know, methane is flammable. I'm sure you can see where this is going. The flame test will also sometimes be done when digging wells in case they are dug into an underground pocket of CO2. Wells were most often dug with more than one person, and the person that is inside was tied to a rope. If the light went out, they could be dragged out. Sadly, this lesson was likely learned the hard way. Another natural source is the little thought about hot springs and geysers. Okay, I know, not all of them release CO2, and there are many popular tourist destinations. However, there are still many that do. This can be dangerous to both people and any animals who go there for a drink. The next natural one is respiration. Okay, I know it sounds weird, but stick with me. Remember how humans and animals breathe in oxygen and breathe out CO2? Well, if they're in a tightly sealed area, there is the risk of CO2 poisoning from respiration if there is no ventilation. I suppose in theory a barn could do this, but I will be honest, I have never seen a barn that was sealed well enough. They all seem to be drafty. This is mostly shown in movies in one of two ways. Inside a car that's buried under snow, or something similar, or being buried alive. Being buried alive was a true risk and reality in history. It's why grave bells were made. In case anybody was buried alive, they could ring the bell. Why? Because too many times they would dig up bodies only to find claw marks on the inside of a coffin, and the person would have died from CO2 poisoning instead of whatever else they thought they had died from. I have also heard stories of this when people were bricked inside of walls or caves as a form of capital punishment. Speaking of being buried, burial chambers and tombs not only have limited ventilation, if any, they also have decaying, people. Decaying organisms put off CO2. This can make places people were buried a pocket of death in more ways than one. Other organisms include vegetation. If a silo is not well kept and the corn started to decay, say after an apocalypse, this could cause the silo to contain large amounts of CO2. Last are forest fires. These make large amounts of CO2 on top of the deadly flames. I remember watching what was supposedly a true story where some firefighters were being overtaken by flames, and so they hid inside of a cave. They all lost consciousness, but did live in the long run. An interesting twist. Now let's cover the man-made sources. First up is combustion. This includes wood, coal, gas, etc. that are burned in poorly ventilated areas. This can be used for heating, lighting, cooking, boiling water for washing laundry, warming bath water, and much more. I have lived in homes where I didn't worry about the wood stove because it was way too drafty. I have also had carbon dioxide detectors in other homes. And yes, it normally went off a couple times per winter. We would just open all the doors and windows, no matter how cold it was, for an hour or two to air the house. This is not recommended by the local fire departments. Or, any fire department, as they would tell you to let them handle it. The fermentation of alcohol and food is another source. Historically, this was done in basements or even caves. As we have already covered, these do not always have the best ventilation. However, there are many historical records of wine houses making ventilation, so if you have a specific era or place where you're writing, you might need to do a little research. We have all been to a Halloween thing where dry ice is used to make fog. What few people know is the process of converting from a solid to a gas leads to a buildup of CO2 if it is not in a well-ventilated area. Anyone else seen the use of ventilation theme here? I'm half afraid someone's going to put a warning sticker on my back. There is some equipment that uses CO2 as well. I will cover a couple, but if your character works with chemicals, I suggest researching them. First, CO2 is used as a shielding gas in some welding processes. Simply put, it's used to keep the oxygen out of the welded area while it hardens to make the weld stronger. Some chemical manufacturings can cause CO2. There are also the dangers of making CO2 if certain chemicals are mixed together. It is illegal where I live to tell you which ones. Again, if your character is working with chemicals, research will be needed. There are some post-apocalyptic possibilities. On top of everything already said, collapsed buildings or underground bunkers could have compromised ventilation. Whether the ventilation pipe of the bunker is bent or a building collapsed, making it sealed off. This is a dangerous situation for your character. CO2 will inevitably build up, and they will need to find a way to get fresh air in or risk the consequences. Unmonitored industrial sites is another danger. Some industrial sites use CO2 in their manufacturing, and the container will inevitably fail. It will be dangerous to anyone nearby and could leak into low-lying areas around the site. So, now that we know where CO2 comes from, let's cover the signs and symptoms of CO2 poisoning for your character. These include headaches, dizziness, nausea, fatigue, confusion, weakness, dizziness, feeling flush, shortness of breath, hyperventilation, chest pains, fast heart rate, disorientation, paranoia, visual disturbances. My favorite example is seeing ghosts. Panic attacks, tingling in the limbs, twitching, loss of muscle coordination, fainting, seizures or convulsions, coma, and death. What should your character do if they, or likely another character, believe they have CO2 poisoning? Great question. No matter what you're writing, the first aid is to remove them from the area with the CO2 and into fresh air. This can be tricky depending on how far they need to go to get to fresh air and the level of CO2s. Death pockets are called that because they lack oxygen that your character needs to survive. Once they're in fresh air, your character can sit upright if they are conscious and breathing well. If they feel dizzy, lying down would be safest. However, if they are unconscious, they should be placed on the side in what is called the recovery position. This is lying on their side so that they do not choke if they become ill. Whichever side is fine unless your character is pregnant, and then the left side is best so that the baby does not compress any blood vessels leading to circulation issues. In historical times, many people believed that fanning a person could help get oxygen into their lungs better. This could also be used as someone trying to help waiting for an ambulance in modern times. It could definitely be used after the apocalypse. In modern times, the victims of CO2 poisoning are given oxygen, and in severe cases, oxygen therapy is used. Oxygen in this case refers to the mask with the oxygen placed over the face. Oxygen therapy is when a person is placed in a sealed area with up to 100% oxygen. The amount is based on the patient's needs. From my research, it looks like the first recorded case of oxygen being used in a hospital setting was in 1885. This became fairly common in hospitals during the 1930s and the 1940s. Portable tanks were invented and used in ambulances during the 1950s. The home oxygen tanks were made in the 1950s, but it was in the 1960s and 1970s when they became more common inside of the home. To sum up, CO2 poisoning can be used for many types of stories. It makes for amazing suspense. It's the perfect way to show and not tell. The tension of something being wrong, but not knowing what it is, or finding people dead with no seeable reason why. This can be very powerful in a story. If everyone dies going into one spot, it could easily lead to superstitions about that spot, or even outright fear. It can be a great mystery. Why are people dying? Or maybe there is only enough CO2 to make the symptoms but not kill anybody. Perhaps it's used in a murder plot or to prove someone's innocence. There are a plethora of ways that this can be incorporated, so get creative and have some fun with it. Fun fact, dry ice is CO2 at an extremely low temperature. One quick reminder before we get into all the ways things could possibly go wrong in your story. To help others find this content, pop on over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a review. Or if you're watching on YouTube, drop me a comment and say hello. Or ask a question. It's the best way to help others find my content, and I'd love to hear from you guys. And now for everyone's favorite part, what could possibly go wrong in your story? Likely to go wrong. Your character is in a home that is well insulated. They're using the fireplace and develop a headache. They do not realize that it is CO2 buildup. Also likely to go wrong. Your animal character went into a hot spring to get a drink, only to be surrounded by CO2. If they don't leave soon, this could be deadly. Possible to go wrong. A container of CO2 is punctured at an industrial site. Everyone will need to evacuate quickly, or this could be deadly. Also possible to go wrong. Your character is exploring a cave and holds a torch out to make sure they do not go into any deadly gases. When the torch suddenly goes out, it's so dark that they can't find their way out. If no one comes looking for them, this could be deadly. Unlikely to go wrong. Your character starts seeing ghosts whenever they are home overnight. They never see them when they first come home. They have no idea that this is CO2 poisoning. Also unlikely to go wrong. Your character is close to a volcano when it erupts and sends out plumes of CO2. This could be deadly. Improbable, but still technically in the realm of possibilities. Your character is sailing in the ocean when there is a lake overturned. CO2 envelops their ship. This could be deadly. Also improbable, but still technically in the realm of possibilities. A volcano erupts, letting out large amounts of CO2. This settles in the valley below and kills off entire villages and ecosystems. Now for the announcement that you have all been waiting for. I am so excited to announce the new companion book series for this podcast. If you've been enjoying the deep dives that we take together here on Writing Roll with Allie, then get ready because I have bundled some of your favorite topics into something truly special, a book. Introducing The Writer's Guide to Rural Life, Volume 1. This book takes the essence of several podcast episodes and transforms them into the ultimate guide for crafting rural stories that feel alive, authentic, and full of depth. It's packed with survival techniques, food preservations, fire starting, shelter building, and so much more. But this isn't just another how-to book. It's a unique blend of historical nuggets, apocalyptic predictions, personal stories, modern insights, with a dash of humor, if I do say so myself. And the what could possibly go wrong section has been reworked into a one-of-a-kind probability index to spark your creativity. The index offers challenges for your characters to tackle, whether you're in the midst of character development, plot twists, or comedic disasters. Whether you're asking, what could realistically happen? Or what could go hilariously wrong? You'll find endless story inspiration to help you explore, imagine, and create like never before. The Writer's Guide to Rural Life with Probability Index is available on all platforms. Don't miss your chance to add this to your library of writing resources. Stay tuned for the release date of The Writer's Guide to Rural Life Volume 2 in the coming weeks. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy wordsmithing!